I got what I'm going to share with you this morning as an experience. I mean, through my experience with English. I was born in a village, typical village, Tanzanian village, In those days, not nowadays villages in Tanzania, the modern villages in Tanzania, people have mobile phones there, so it's different. It's not like in our days. Now, I was born in a village like that, in a village where you would see no one with shoes, the whole village. So that is the kind of a village that I was born in. Do you understand? Now, I went to primary school in a village, a place where they would always tell us to speak Swahili when we go to school, and they would give us cards because we didn't speak Swahili. We were speaking Sukuma most of the time at school. And that was the only language that we were able to speak. But then when I joined secondary school, my parents took me to a secondary school, and I joined that secondary school. And my situation with English, my condition with English was still the same. And so, my secondary school education was taken in town. It was my first time to live in town. Imagine, you can't speak good Swahili, and then you go live in town. You've never seen electricity. Can you imagine? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yes. You have never seen tarmac roads. You have never seen traffic lights. You've never seen story buildings. You've never seen all those many things that are found in town. And now you are in town. And then you see everybody in town. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Maybe you've never traveled on a bus. Then you are in town now. And your parents, my parents were really expecting me to do well, to perform in class. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. But the challenge that I was facing was English. Because I could see all the teachers coming speaking in English. And I wasn't even able to speak good Swahili. See, you see, what I would do every morning when I get to school was just sit back. And every time I got through the gate of the school, I started trembling. I trembled. It was a day school. I trembled for almost 8 hours every day. Because I thought everyone knew except me. But you know what happened? One day, because the teachers realized that I was kind of dummy, and so what they did was every time they come to class, they would point me, wanting me to answer something. And so the rest of the class members, my fellow students, would just laugh at me. They would always turn around and see, this is the kind of a guy who can ask the question. So they would turn around and laugh. Can you imagine? So for some times, I was a kind of a laughing stock of the class. And you can imagine, until one day I got tired. I said, because I had a friend, I remember a friend of mine, an evangelist, who had actually told me about praying. So then an idea came to my mind that I can pray about this. And so one day I got tired and decided to pray about my situation. So that day when I got home, I prayed. In fact, there was something that happened, and I wouldn't like to speak it here, that made me to be pushed to think that I have to go pray about the situation. So I went and prayed about the situation. And a few days later, something came in my mind. I went back to my bag and looked for the books that I had collected from the village, the grade 3, the standard 3 English books that I had collected. You see, in Form 1, and then you can't read Form 1 books. You have to go start with the grade 3 English books. And so I started with the grade 3 English books. I started reading. The idea was read aloud. So I started reading those books aloud every day. And I can tell you, after 6 weeks of doing that seriously, every day, getting back home from school, I would just lock myself in the room and start reading books aloud. It actually changed me. And what happened? I remember it was one morning, the teacher came in the class. And he asked me, what is a kiosk? For the first time, what is a kiosk? And he came toward me, and the kids turned around, my fellow students turned around to see, oh, they saw this is the guy being asked. They started laughing before I answered. And while they were laughing, I stood up and said, a kiosk is a small shop. And the teacher started praising me, saying, very good. In fact, I didn't even understand what he was saying, but I realized he was giving those good comments about what I had done. And so that encouraged me so much, because the kids stopped laughing immediately after I had said a kiosk is a small shop. They stopped. And then I realized from that day that I could do more than that. And so I kept following up the teachers, and they would encourage me in Swahili. They would tell me, you can really speak, you can do it. And I remember one of the teachers, Swahili teacher, he just came in the class. In fact, he had encouraged me. He said, you can do it. Let me tell you, those who are laughing at you from English medium school, I will show you that they also don't know everything. So he came to class one day and he just wrote a word I remember, compulsory. And he told the kids to spell it. So they would always pronounce it and give the meaning of the word, but they could not spell it, the whole class, and that encouraged me. But if they can't, because I had thought that they knew everything. So I said, if they can't, that means I can do something too, right? But then, my story with English from there, after like six weeks, I said I was able to speak a little English, and then I kept on doing the exercise that brought me to where I was. And then when I got to Form 2, I was like number 1 in the class. I was doing better, and everyone would just look at me. Now, Vietnam, I am on the top. Then I stopped. I stopped learning English. So when I completed my secondary education, I had an opportunity to go present on Radio Free Africa. And I lost that chance because the one who was interviewing us, the one who was actually auditioning us, came and listened to me, and he said, you can't speak that English. To take you as a presenter, no. He said, no, with your English, no. That really encouraged. I know to most people it would discourage, but for me, it encouraged me so much. I said, oh, I thought I was able to speak. And here I can't present this chance, and I needed it so badly. And he said, you can. Try some other time. So what I did is find every book, find every newspaper, find every English book. And when I went back to the village, it was just go to the farm in the morning, in the afternoon, come back home, just go behind our house and start reading books aloud. So I had so many books, other books that I could not even understand anything, but what I did was just read aloud every day. So you understand what I'm talking about? And when our results came out, I had to go all the way from Sengerema, from Nyehunge to Iringa. Can you imagine that? But then after my Form 6, the turning point started after I was discontinued from college, from Muhimbili. When I was discontinued there, that was when I decided that there's nothing that I am left with than improve my English. So it was day and night deal with English. I dealt with English seriously. In fact, I read something in a book that most people don't read. Most people are made to think that it's a religious book. And I read something from that book. It gave me an idea that someone can be a native of a country, a native of a land he's never been before. While I was reading through that book, I ran into the idea that you can be in here and not be out here. So then I started finding out what makes a person to be out of here, to be here, but not of here. And I realized it was the thinking. I had something speaking to me, telling me that, okay, think about white people when they come here. What do they think? They are in Tanzania, but what do they think? They don't think things about here. So then I said, okay, if it is possible to think differently, then an idea came to me that I can think in English. When I changed the program of learning English and I started dealing with developing to think, right? And so when I developed a measure of thinking in English, it was after 3 months. I made it after 3 months. So when I developed some levels, a measure of thinking in English, that was when I started studying more about mind. So my topic today says, be born again for your success. Now listen to me. This idea, this concept has actually been thought by many people. In fact, many people have been made to think that this is a religious concept. Because you hear this in churches. They talk about born again. And some people call themselves, I'm a born again Christian, right? But let me tell you something. This idea, born again, is not a religious concept. It is not. Now I want you to think with me. What does it mean to be born? Zura, what does it mean to be born? When we say I'm born, what does it mean? Can you be born without being created? Oh. Between being born and creation, which one starts? You have to be created, right? Before you're born. Okay, now, are we completely born? Are we completely born when we proceed from our mother's womb? Are we completely born? Are we? Okay. If no, what is not yet completely born in us, what is not yet completely created on the inside of us when we are born? Yeah? Huh? The memory content, right? The memory content. You have the brain is ready, right? You have the fingers, you have the skin, you have the muscles, you have everything. But the only part of us that is not fully complete when we are born is the memory content. In fact, when we are born, the memory content starts on speed. I know it starts when we are still in our mother's womb, but it starts on speed when we are born. So you must know that when you are born, there's something that is not complete. There's a part of you that is not completely born. And studies really show that we are completely born at age 7. Do you understand what I'm talking about? We are completely born at age 7. The memory content of a person produces his mind, heart, and spirit. So when you talk about mind, heart, and spirit, your mind and your heart and your spirit can never be any different from your memory content. So these are subcontents. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Think with me. Those of you who have done science, you would agree with me that when nuclei, one from the mother and the other from the father, when they come together, they form a cell, a single cell. And that cell starts multiplying, and they say it multiplies into a ball of cells to form the so-called, what do they call it? A ball of cell. In fact, it makes a zygote. And then from that, before we can have an embryo, this group of cell will actually start, they say, differentiating into layers. And you will be surprised to know that it differentiates into 3 layers to get the physical body. We come from 3 layers of cells. And you can be surprised to know that even the mind, heart, and spirit actually are basically the 3 subcontents from the general memory content. So we have another dimension on the inside of us. Do you understand what I'm talking about? But see, why do I say born again? Born again because when you are physically born, the physical part of you, when the physical part of me is born, it cannot be reborn. When your fingers are born, they cannot be born again. When your brain is born, it cannot be born again. Do you understand what I'm talking about? When your kidney, when your liver, when your gut, when your intestines, you cannot be born again. In fact, they cannot be born again. You cannot have a replacement of your liver. You cannot have a replacement of your brain. You cannot have a replacement of your ears. You cannot start again, all over again, to get a new ear. You cannot. You cannot have new eyes. You cannot start again. You cannot start again to have a new brain. But you can only start again when it comes to the content of your brain. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
You can only start again when it comes to the content of your brain. This is the only dimension of a person that can start again. The human brain was created in such a way that it cannot be overloaded. For the rest of your life, you will always have empty space to start again, retaining some new contents. So I did it. I started retaining new content. I started retaining English content. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You know, there are people who think thinking is a product of brain. Huh? There are people who think so. They think, okay, if I am intelligent, I have so much brain power. They think, okay, because I have so much brain power, that means I can think. Let me tell you, no, it's not true. Thinking is a product of your memory content. That's why you can't think in Japanese. Because you don't have Japanese in your memory content. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
You can't think in what is not in your memory content. So this is the only part of us that can be born again. So the man who introduced the idea, in fact, he was talking to someone who admired him. He was doing some things that every person thought were impossible. He came to this person, highly educated, and he came to him and said to him, I am surprised because the things that you do, no one can do. This great man told him, said, you must be born again, because he was shocked. He knew that the things that he was doing, everybody could do. But the problem is the memory content. So he was trying to tell him that the reason I do the things that you do is because the kind of memory content that I have is not what you have. I have a different memory content. And so my thinking, my mind, my heart, and spirit are different. But if you want to do these things, you can also do. But you need to be born again. There are two types of memory content. And so he told him, that which is produced, that which has the mind, which is a product of the flesh memory content. You see, there are two types of memory content. Memory content number one is called the flesh memory content. These memory content are given names based on their components, their composition, what is composed in the contents themselves. Do you understand? And he's saying the other one is the spirit type of memory content. So you have two types of memory content: the flesh memory content and the spirit memory content. And so he was telling him that, no. Because your mind and heart and spirit are born from the flesh memory content. Your mind, heart, and spirit are born from the flesh memory content. That's why you can't do the things that I do, because we don't perceive the same. Your imaginations are not like my imaginations. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And so he said, what you need is start all over again in the content of your brain. So you need to be born of the Spirit, which means you need to start putting in new things so that you can have the Spirit type of memory content. Do you understand what I'm talking about? All right. That is where the idea started. But you see, this idea is so much mixed up today in this world. People have owned it. Churches have owned this idea, and they walk around thinking that it's theirs. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Being born again. And so that was the idea that has actually made me one who was born where they speak Sukuma morning to evening. The reason I speak English like this is because of the heart and the spirit of English. It's because my thinking ran in both English and Swahili. So it is possible. But you must know that the one to change, it is your mind. Now, what is the mind? The mind is the emotional, it's the subcontent, because we have the general memory content. And so from the general memory content, you have these three subcontents. The mind is the non-emotional content of the brain. The heart is the emotional content of the brain. The spirit, the regular content. Now, if you want to know your spirit, how do you know your spirit? Now, there are people who don't even know their spirit. I've come here several times asking people, do you know yourself? And they put out their hands. But I can ask you today, do you know your heart? Because hearts can be named. The heart, this word heart is not limited to the organ that pumps blood. There's another heart, which is the emotional content of your brain. Now, how do you know your mind? How do you know your mind? You have to study your inner conversations. You have to study your inner speaking. And then start looking at the kind that are not emotional. Every topic, every word, every speaking of your inner conversation that is not emotional. Together as we collect them, they form an exclusive content. And that content is what we call the mind. And it determines your attitude. It determines your will. Think about your will. What do you have a will for? Do you will to do business? Do you have a will for business? Do you have the right attitude in this business? Right attitude. That is why, if you look around, we have so many intelligent people in Africa. But look at those who are successful in business. Look at the people who are successful in business. You're going to be surprised to find that maybe most of them are not professional, are not experts, not educated. Now we have limited understanding to people who've gone to school And we think that those who have not gone to school do not have any understanding. You can be intelligent, but still have a problem with your mind. When I talk about your mind, I mean the understanding. You may not have the understanding. And understanding means the right way to do. You may not know the right way to do something. You may not have the right attitude. You may not have the right will. If you don't have the right understanding, if you don't have the right attitude, the way you take business, if you don't have the right will, it is impossible to succeed in business. No matter how intelligent you are. The emotional content of your brain determines in fact your passions, your desires. If you read the book written by Napoleon Hill, it talks about if you were to succeed in anything, you're going to have a strong desire. You need to have a strong desire. Our desires are not physical. Our desires are product of our memory content. The emotional. Now, think with me. You cannot have emotions. You cannot have emotions of what you have never retained on the inside of you. Now, growing up, the emotional things that we have retained in us are movies and songs. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Movies and ninja movies. Huh? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Movies of people who kill each other. Just in the past few years, I've been thinking about these bongo movies, and I sit down sometimes, I analyze at what they do, and I start thinking about their thinking. I compare with some other movies outside, and I see, why is it that it is almost impossible to see a movie go without funeral, without tragedy? They dramatize so much of death and love. Going to the beach, getting to the office, staying in the office for 2 minutes, pick up your phone and call for baby, go to the beach and spend a long time on the beach, walking around. And we spend so much time looking at these emotional things as if they have nothing to do with us. And that is why we are raising a generation in this country, a generation of children, a generation of people who don't enjoy working hard. They don't feel working hard. Because all they have retained in the emotional contents of their brains are movies of people who just go to the office, sit around, turn around just like this, and then call baby, and then spend a long time walking around the beach, chatting, doing this. You can't work hard without the passion to work hard. Your passion is not a product of your brain. Your passion is a product of your memory content. It comes from your memory content. Your desires, we need strong desires. Napoleon says you need to have a strong desire, an obsession. You need to be obsessed. Now, look at your desires. Desires for sport. Desires for Simba. Desires for younger. There are people who are ready to die. Huh? People who are ready to die. It may be raining cats and dogs. I'm telling you. It may be raining cats and dogs, and yet you will see the people crowding in the stage just to see Simba and the young girl. But let me tell you, if it's raining cats and dogs, people will feel not to go to work. Like Jay, they feel happy not to go to work. The other day I was thinking, it rained for a week. It's like 3 days, non-stop. But then I was passing down somewhere where I was staying, and I was surprised to see people in bars. I said, with rain? All this rain, and there are still people in bars. That's their passion. It's a desire. They have a desire for drink. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Think about your passions. Think about your desires. They are so important to your success in life. So important. How can you do business when you don't have desire for business? How can you do something? How can you expect to succeed in something that you don't have desire for? Guys, do you understand what I'm talking about? So this is the dimension. You can succeed in anything that you want. But check your desires, your passions, your attitude, your will. Do you have a willpower? Do you have a willpower for what you want? Am I talking to somebody? Do you understand? Ask yourself, do I have a willpower for what I want? Is it something that is an obsession? You can't sit down. You can't feel good if you miss it. You can't feel good if you miss it. You don't want to miss. You don't want to miss going to work. You can't feel good if you don't work. No matter the work. Now, there are people who just sit down and they see something. No matter the work. They feel doing, cleaning, doing this. You know? We have a generation that is choosing what to do because of what you have retained in your brain about work. What have you retained in your brain about work? What have you seen about work? Have you retained the kind of components that can actually create the desire to work on the inside of you? I go around as an English coach. Go around and I look at people, I look at my students, and I try to tell them that, well, you're spending so much time dealing with tenses, grammar, but see, the teachers in primary school teach grammar. They teach the tenses. And yet, they have not mastered English speaking. Listen to their English when they speak. The English doesn't have the grammar they teach. So I keep telling the people, this is the way to learn it. I learned it this way, and they still don't understand me. You know why they don't understand me? Because of what they have received. Their attitude toward English learning. The problem is their attitude toward English learning. The problem is their understanding. What do they understand about English learning? Today there would be people who would come up and say, oh, maybe it was because you lived in America, maybe you never lived in England, maybe you never lived in South Africa. They would think so, as if it is impossible to be able to speak like this when you're born here. I'm telling you, it is possible. Because I've never lived in America, never been in America, never been in England, never had an advantage of going to an English medium school. But you need to have the understanding. You need to know the right thing to do. What you want to succeed in. You need to know the right thing to do. You need to have the right attitude. You need to have a passion. You need to be obsessed. You can have an obsession of what is not part of your memory content. You can have an obsession. Where do you get that obsession? You don't get the obsession from your food. Do you understand? Whatever you want, they say examine yourself. Examine yourself. In other words, examine your inner conversation. Then know your mind. If you always talk about sports, what do you always talk about on the inside of you? What are the topics of your inner conversations? Sit down and find out the topics of your inner conversation. The emotional and the non-emotional topics of your inner conversation. Because that's how we think. We think by speaking on the inside of us. When you know the topics, the major topics at least. Young men, you always talk about maybe ladies, maybe sports, maybe, when you have identified all the topics, and then look at the kind of topics that you always talk about on the inside of you, and then start looking at what kind of a mind can come out of those topics. What kind of a mind, what kind of a heart, what kind of a spirit can come out of those kind of topics of inner conversation? How can you be a successful businessman when you don't have any conversation about business on the inside of you? Like that great man told the people. He said, you come to the church every day. Yes, you come to the church every day. And you talk a little bit about me, but your hearts are far from me. Your emotional content. I am not in your emotional content. And that is why you can't imagine of me. How many people say that there is no God? There is no God. How many people believe in Zinjatropos? So many people, highly educated people. Do you know why they believe? Because that's what they have in the memory content of their brain. The kind of stuff they have fed their memory content with. And so their understanding of things on earth is a product of what they have fed their brains with. And so even their imaginations, you tell someone to imagine the presence of God. Do you think they can imagine? You can imagine. And so that is why we have this. The impossible is possible. Do you know why? Because we were created with an ability to imagine anything that you want to happen in your life. You have heard people say, do you believe? They think believe. They have limited the definition of believe to just to say yes. There are so many people who say, if you ask them, do you believe? They say yes. They think it's yes. Believe means, do you imagine? Listen to me. Believe means, do you imagine of what you are expecting? Do you have an indelible tenacious mental picture of what you are expecting. Faith means, do you have, faith is a mental picture, a tenacious, indelible mental picture of what you expect. It's the material, it's that image. Now let me ask you a question. Can you imagine yourself with a lot of money? Can you imagine yourself with cars? Yeah? Does formal education prepare you to imagine? What kind of imaginations do you have? Because imaginations are so important to us. You cannot imagine beyond the emotional content of your brain. So, success in life is not an accident in anything. Success is not an accident. Success is a lifestyle in anything that you want. There are specific measurable actions that you need to live by. But you can't live by these specific measurable actions if they are not part of your emotional thinking, emotional speaking. You cannot do. And that is why they say, there are so many people who say, we are what we think. Listen to me, that is not finished. We are what we think in the emotional contents of our brain. Not in the mind. You can't be what you think in the mind. You can only be what you think in the emotional content. So we are what we think. What you always think emotionally is what you do regularly. Is what you can develop character for. So you can develop character for what you don't think emotionally about. Now examine yourself. Examine yourself. Like what I did. Examine yourself. That's exactly what I did. I examined myself. And I realized that I don't speak English because. Not because I didn't know tenses. Not because I didn't know grammar. Not because I didn't know this or that. Not because I didn't know the meaning of words. But I realized that in me, there is no English thinking. So what I decided to do is develop, cultivate an English memory content on the inside of me. Cultivate an English memory content on the inside of me. Now, if you want to succeed in life, whatever kind of success that you want in life, think of the kind of things that you should feed. Think of the kind of things that you should feed your brain with. They say change your focus. Change the things that you pay attention to. If you cannot change what you listen to, if you cannot change what you read, if you cannot change what you retain in your brain, if you cannot change your inner speaking, you can't change anything about you. You see, when God designed us, He designed our inner speaking in such a way that we should have kind of inner speakings that are controlled. How do you know that this is a strong mind or this is a weak mind? Do you have control of your inner speaking? There are people who start speaking on the inside and they don't finish talking about what they talk. How many people have the same experience? I have the same experience. to sit down and start talking about something. In fact, there are people who can't talk about something even for 1 minute on the inside of them. When you start talking about something, it branches out to something else. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So your kind of speaking on the inside of you are just running like this. So if you have such kind of inner conversation, it's not very easy to imagine. It actually affects your imagination. And that is why we are living in a generation where people cannot imagine, cannot have indelible mental pictures. You see, I imagine myself speaking English like this, and I have that mental picture. I had a mental picture that one day I'll be speaking to people. Tenacious mental picture. So I saw myself. What do you see yourself? What do you imagine? What do you imagine? Study your imaginations. They are very important to your success. Your desires, they are very important to your success. So once you discover the kind of desires that you have, it is not too late. It is not, everyone say, it's not too late.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
Because you can be born again.
God can be born again.
I can be born again. I cannot change my fingers. I cannot change my brain.
I cannot change my brain.
But I can start all over again in the memory concept. Yes. You can change. In fact, you can put to sleep this memory concept. The other memory. You can put it to sleep. Like, I don't think anymore in Sukuma. I really don't think anymore in Sukuma. I know I have Sukuma on the inside of me, but I don't think in Sukuma anymore. Why? I have put that to sleep. Now you start working with your inside, your inner topics, your speaking, your inner speaking. The new knowledges that you feed your brain with. Start training your inner conversations to be stayed on the new knowledges. Gradually, step by step, your inner speaking will start turning habitually to the new topics. That you can change. That is how you can change. That is how you can change. You must be born again. How many of you have understood the idea of being born again? How many of you have understood the idea of being born again? Oh, guys. So it's not a religious concept. It's just examine yourself. Minds have names. Hearts have names. Spirit have names. Know your mind. Know your heart. Know your spirit. And ask yourself, is this the mind that I can do business with and be able to succeed? Is this the heart that I can do business with and be able to succeed? Is this the spirit that I can do business with and be able to succeed? Once you know that you don't have the mind, heart, and spirit of business, then you go to start. You start a process of being born again. You start working on yourself. Because the heart, the mind, heart, and spirit are product of the general memory content. So you start putting in your brain, you start creating a new memory content that will give you the kind of heart that you have to do business with and be sure to succeed. May God bless you. Amen.